right, good evening and welcome to the community meeting for the Freedom Circle Project. Thank you for joining us this evening. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is James Gambrell. I am the Public Participation Specialist for the site. Kindly bear with us as we wait for others to join us. Please know that this meeting is being recorded so that those that are not able to join tonight can watch at a later time on YouTube. We will have Spanish interpretation for those with Spanish language needs, and we will go over that in the next slide. And for those of you just joining us, thank you again for taking the time out of your evening to join us. We're just waiting for a few others to join us and give them time to get their technical setup going. And as we wait, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is James Gambrell. I am the Public Participation Specialist for the Freedom Circle Project. Please know that this meeting is being recorded. Spanish interpretation is available for those with Spanish language needs. Okay, it's now 6:02. And so we'll go ahead and move to slide number 2. I'll now turn it over to John Primati, who will give instructions on how to select your language.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight's meeting is being offered in English and Spanish. To change your audio, you can click on the globe icon or the interpretation button to pull up the interpretation window. If you don't see the globe icon, you may need to click on the More button, which is shown with 3 dots. Once you have the interpretation menu open, you can choose between English or Spanish audio. If you would like to listen in Spanish, please select the Spanish option. You can also choose to mute the original audio if you would like to only hear the interpreted language. I will now ask one of our Spanish interpreters to relay these instructions in Spanish.
Buenas tardes. Si necesitan interpretación al español, por favor diríjanse al globo que está en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Ahí van a encontrar la posibilidad de elegir entre inglés y español. En caso de conectarse desde un teléfono inteligente, tienen que dirigirse a donde se encuentran los 3 puntitos, que dice más, y ahí elegir interpretación de idiomas. De esa manera van a encontrar la opción inglés y español. Una vez que seleccionan la opción español, seleccionen hecho o done y de esa manera van a encontrar disponible la función de interpretación. Gracias.
Thank you. James, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you for that. So everyone should make that selection now and choose the globe icon and select English or Spanish as you prefer. At this time, I will ask for the link to the slides to be dropped into the chat. So for those of you that want to possibly download or follow along at home, you'll see the link to Envirostore database so that you can view the slides at home. Slide number 3, please. Okay, we kindly ask that you please stay muted throughout the presentation. When you do wish to ask a question, simply raise your hand and I will call upon you and ask you to unmute. We will also have a 30-minute question and answer period after the presentation of the information. But feel free to raise your hand, and for those of you that are joining via telephone, if you press *9, that will indicate a raised hand, and then I will ask you to unmute by pressing *6. During the meeting, the Q&A feature will be used for asking any questions, and I will ask those to the panel. The chat will be used only for disseminating information. Okay, slide number 4, please. It's my pleasure to introduce the Department of Toxic Substances Control project team, or DTSC team. So allow me to introduce Dennis Palacios, your project manager. If you come on screen, Dennis. Thank you so very much. And we have Nathan Unangst, unit chief for the project. Thank you, thank you, Nathan. And now we have Wei Ying Yang. He is our toxicologist for the project. And of course, you already know me, James Gambrell, your public participation specialist. And then we have Mark Sorensen, your project engineering geologist. Thank you, Mark. Excellent. And with that, I will turn over the presentation of materials to your project manager, Dennis Palacios.
Thank you, James. Next slide. So slide 5, Department of Toxic Substances Control, DTSC. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening to discuss 3925 Freedom Circle Project, also known as the Freedom Circle Project. Let's get started with an overview of the Department of Toxic Substances Control, or DTSC for short. So, DTSC is one of 6 agencies within the California Environmental Protection Agency and is the state regulatory agency responsible for cleanup. DTSC's mission is to protect California's people, communities, and environment from toxic substances and to enhance economic vitality by restoring contaminated lands, enforcing hazardous substances laws, and compelling safer consumer products. DTSC's Site Mitigation and Restoration Program is responsible for overseeing the evaluation and cleanup of contaminated properties. Next slide. Slide 6, purpose of the public comment period. So, the purpose of the public comment period is to provide members of the community with information, answer questions, and accept written and or recorded verbal comments about the proposed cleanup. Additionally, during the public comment period, the draft remedial action plan is shared with the community for review, as well as all other documents submitted to DTSC. Next slide. Slide 7, cleanup process. So what you see here is an overview of DTSC's cleanup process, starting with the evaluation phase or site investigation phase, which begins with the discovery of a site. Then we verify if a release has occurred and define the extent of the contamination and conduct risk assessment. Once the evaluation phase is completed, we then move on to the remedy selection phase, which is the current phase the site is in. The first step in the remedy selection phase is to evaluate remedial options and determine which remedy is appropriate for the site and site contaminants. The remedy plan, which for the site is a draft remedial action plan, presents the evaluation of the different potential remedies and the recommended remedial alternative. After the draft remedial action plan has been approved and the CEQA analysis certified, we then move into the implementation phase, where site-specific designs and monitoring plans are prepared, along with construction plans and, if necessary, long-term operation and maintenance plans and land use restrictions. Next slide. Slide 8, cleanup process. So here we have the same cleanup process roadmap, but in Spanish. So we'll leave this up for a few seconds. All right, next slide. Slide 9, site location. So the site highlighted in orange on your screen is located within the city of Santa Clara and is approximately 13.3 acres, incorporating 2 land parcels. The site is bounded to the north by a City of Santa Clara pump station, beyond which is Mission College Boulevard, to the east by San Tomas Aquino Creek, to the south, Highway 101, and to the west, Pedro's Restaurant and Cantina and Freedom Circle. Next slide. Slide 10, site history. So between the 1930s to the late 1960s, the site was used for agriculture. Aside from grading in the 1970s, the site remained vacant until 1997, when imported soil and gravel fill was placed on the site for an overflow parking lot and construction staging area for a neighboring facility. Additionally, in 1997, 2 environmental investigations were conducted that found the soil at the site was contaminated with lead, arsenic, and pesticides, also known as organochlorine pesticides, or OCPs for short. In 2000, the property owner at the time entered into a cleanup agreement with DTSC, and in 2001, an additional environmental investigation was performed. The 2001 environmental investigation determined the extent of the contamination at the site, and in 2002, additional gravel was brought onto the site to act as a protected cover or cap for the site. In 2003, a removal action work plan was reviewed and approved by DTSC, which proposed an engineered cap and institutional controls as the recommended remedy. As a result of the 2003 removal action work plan approval, a land use covenant was recorded for the site to restrict the use of the property. All prior vehicles and associated structures and construction materials were removed from the site in 2015. In 2024, the new property owner entered into a new cleanup agreement with DTSC to clean up the site to residential land use standards. As part of that cleanup agreement, an additional environmental investigation was performed to further determine the extent of contamination at the site. Next slide. Next slide, please. Slide 11, investigations. Between 1997 and 2024, environmental site investigations were performed to collect soil and groundwater samples to characterize the site. Based on the site characterization performed, lead, arsenic, and pesticides, specifically dieldrin, were identified as the site contaminants in soil. Groundwater sampling data did not report any concentrations of concern, and since volatile organic compounds were not detected during the groundwater sampling event, the potential for soil vapor, also referred to as soil gas, which is gas between soil particles, was determined to not be a concern for the site. On the right, you will see 2 photos of what a typical soil investigation consists of. The top right is on the top right, you have a contractor overlooking the soil cores, either to record the soil type or see if any contamination is visible. On the bottom right, you will see a type of drill rig used to collect soil cores and samples. And I believe that's a direct push rig, but maybe something else. Next slide. Slide 12, remedial action plan overview and site cleanup goal. If this is your first time hearing about a remedial action plan, the remedial action plan is known as a remedy selection document. The remedial action plan describes the previous site investigation, the plan to remediate the site, and must clearly and concisely reflect how the decision to remediate the site was made. In addition to identifying the proposed remediation alternative, the remedial action plan also evaluates other potential alternatives and explains the reasons why the selected one was chosen and is the most appropriate. As part of this process, Public input and comments are considered before the remedial action plan can be finalized. Lastly, remedial action plans must establish specific remedial action objectives, including cleanup goals and the time frame for completing cleanup. DTSC, as the regulatory agency providing oversight, verifies all of these interpretations are correct and that the cleanup levels and standards are appropriate. For this site, to ensure the highest level of protection for the intended future use, which will be residential and recreational, the site cleanup goals selected are residential screening levels. Screening levels are used by environmental agencies like DTSC as an initial screening tool to assess whether additional sampling and data analysis are needed to characterize contamination in soil, water, or air to protect human health and the environment. These levels are based on health protective default assumptions and scientific studies that estimate how much of a chemical is considered safe over a certain period of exposure. By using residential screening levels as the cleanup goal, this approach provides long-term environmental safety for the public and future occupants. The cleanup goals for soil at the site are lead, 80 milligrams per kilogram. For arsenic is 11 milligrams per kilogram, and pesticides, specifically dieldrin, 0.034 milligrams per kilogram. Next slide.
And Dennis, I'm just going to pause you there for just a moment, just to make sure that we don't have any questions or if there is any clarifying comments or anything that may come from the anyone listening in. I'm going to check the Q&A, and I don't see anything in the Q&A.
Thank you, James.
And I'm going to look for any raised hands, and I don't see any raised hands. So I will turn it back over to you. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thank you, James. Let me get a drink of water. So slide 13, remedial alternatives considered. The evaluation of the different alternatives proposed as part of the cleanup for this site were refined based on their implementability at the site and applicability for the site contaminants. Based on the refinement process, the selected remedial alternatives were further evaluated to determine which would be the most appropriate to implement at the site. The remedial alternatives presented in the draft remedial action plan were evaluated using the 9 criteria from the United States National Contingency Plan, which are presented based on priority in the draft remedial action plan. Based on the evaluation and refinement process, 4 alternatives were selected for further evaluation in the draft remedial action plan. The first alternative, alternative 1, no action with continued institutional controls, serves as a baseline for comparison to the other alternatives. Under this alternative, the site would remain as is. Alternative 2 proposes excavation off-site disposal of contaminated soil. Under this alternative, the contaminated soil would be excavated and directly loaded onto trucks or temporarily stored on-site and then transported off-site to the appropriate landfill facility. Alternative 3 proposes excavation and on-site strategic placement or encapsulation of the contaminated soil. Under this alternative, the contaminated soil would be excavated and placed within strategically placed soil management cells, also known as engineered containment cells. These containment cells would consist of a cap comprised of gravel and asphalt or concrete pavement. This cap would be constructed over the burial cells, acting as a physical barrier to mitigate potential exposures of the contaminated soil to future site users. Additionally, the containment cells would consist of several low permeability layers, liners, and leachate collection systems. Alternative 4 proposes excavation, on-site stabilization, and off-site disposal of the contaminated soil. Under this alternative, contaminated soil will be excavated, temporarily stored on site based on their arsenic and lead concentrations, mixed with a binder like cement to stabilize the lead and arsenic contaminants, reducing the mobility, and then disposed of at an accepting landfill facility. Under this alternative, all soil excavated, including the soil mixed with the binder, as part of the remedial activities, would be disposed of at an accepting landfill facility. Based on the evaluation and refinement process, alternative 4 was selected as the recommended remedial alternative for the site. Next slide. Slide 14, proposed remedy, alternative 4, excavation, on-site stabilization, and off-site disposal. Under the proposed alternative 4 remedy, the contaminated soil will be excavated, temporarily stored on site based on its arsenic and lead concentrations, and stabilized if concentrations are above hazardous waste criteria, and then disposed of at an accepting landfill facility. The stabilization of the contaminated soil will be aided by a binding reagent such as cement to reduce the mobility of the contaminants. The total depths of the remedial excavation varies, but based on the previous site investigations, the majority of the site will need to be excavated down to approximately 5 feet. In total, approximately 100,000 cubic yards of soil will be excavated as part of the remedial excavation at the site. If existing analytical data is not available for the excavated area indicating that concentrations at the site contaminants do not exceed cleanup goals, the contractor will collect confirmation soil samples and perform analytical testing. These confirmation samples will be collected from the base and sidewalls of the excavation. The contaminated soil that is stabilized will also be tested prior to the disposal at an accepting landfill facility. If import fill is needed for the project prior to it being brought on site, the contractor will ensure that the fill material is in compliance with DTSC's 2001 Information Advisory Clean Import Fill Material Guidance and request approval from DTSC. The determination of the appropriate binder reagent will be achieved through the implementation of a bench scale test. As a contingency to alternative 4, if the bench scale test determines that the metals cannot be appropriately stabilized, the recommended remedial alternative will default to alternative 2, excavation and off-site disposal. Under both alternative 2 and 4, all site soils excavated as part of the remedial activities, including the soil mixed with the binding reagent, will be disposed of at an accepting landfill facility. Next slide. Slide 15, remedial excavation area. This figure presents the approximate limits of the excavation of non-contaminated soil, which is based on the analytical results from the previous site investigations. The white color represents excavations down to 5 feet. The areas in black will be excavated down to 7 feet. And the purple colored areas represent excavations down to 10 feet. There will also be several areas that do not need to be excavated as part of the implementation of the draft remedial action plan because they do not contain any contaminated soil exceeding the site cleanup goals. It is anticipated that the excavation activities will be conducted with equipment such as excavators, front-end loaders, or backhoes to remove contaminated soil. Next slide. Slide 16, community protection measures. During excavation activities, the work will be performed according to multiple site-specific plans. These plans include a health and safety plan, which ensures the workers operating on site are safe. A traffic management plan, also known as a transportation plan, which ensures additional truck traffic and excavation equipment do not create dangerous traffic conditions for the area, and a community air monitoring plan, or CAMP. That requires dust monitoring and assessment of air quality at the site during the implementation of remedial activities. Additionally, the active work areas will be fenced with signage, and as mentioned, dust and air monitoring will be performed. It is anticipated that monitoring devices will be set up upwind and downwind along the perimeter of the site to ensure that dust impacts from the excavation are not moving to off-site areas. If visible dust is observed leaving the site, work will be stopped and additional dust management measures will be implemented until the site is in compliance. Next slide. Slide 17, community protection measures. Some of the additional protective measures from the draft remedial action plan that will be implemented includes the use of water, foam, and/or plastic sheeting to control dust and potential odors at the site. The truckloads will also be covered with their tires cleaned, and the trucks will be inspected prior to leaving the site to verify that soils aren't being tracked out or carried out of the site and deposited in nearby areas. Flaggers will be on site to manage vehicle and pedestrian traffic. Streets nearby will also be swept with wet method street sweepers as needed to clean any dust and soil that is carried out of the site and deposited on nearby streets. Next slide. Slide 18. What you may see. So here are several pictures of what you can anticipate seeing while contaminated soil is being excavated. Soil will likely be excavated using tracked excavator machines and loaded in trucks via loaders, like the one you see here on the left-hand side. Monitoring stations, which measure dust, pollutants, and air quality, such as what you see on the top right picture, will be used to monitor air at the site. Water trucks like the one you see on the lower right will be used to spray soils to limit them from becoming airborne during excavation, and in the middle picture, you will see wheel cleaning equipment that ensures soils are not tracked out of the site on truck tires when vehicles exit the site. Next slide. Slide 19, truck route. Trucks hauling the contaminated soil will take a city-approved defined route that minimizes trips through sensitive receptor areas like residential areas, and anticipated truck routes will be based on the intended appropriate landfill facility for the soil. The first anticipated truck route, Route 101, takes trucks hauling soil from the site onto Freedom Circle, then onto Mission College Boulevard, onto Montauk Expressway, and finally on Highway 101. The second anticipated truck route, Route 880, takes trucks hauling soil from the site onto Freedom Circle, then onto Mission College Boulevard, onto Montauk Expressway, then onto Freeway 880. An average of 40 trucks will enter and exit the site during peak remediation workdays. Trucks will be instructed to minimize idling and to not line up on city streets. Additionally, as mentioned before, flaggers will be present to manage vehicle and pedestrian traffic. Next slide. Slide 20, truck route 101. So here you can see a snapshot of the anticipated truck route for Route 101. I'll leave this up for a few seconds. Next slide. Slide 21, truck route 880. So here's another snapshot of the anticipated truck route for Route 880. So I'll leave this one up for a few seconds as well. Next slide. Slide 22, next steps. So DTSC will continue to receive comments on the draft remedial action plan through March 17th. Following closure of the public comment, DTSC will prepare a responsiveness summary, which will include a response to all the comments received on the draft remedial action plan. If any modifications to the draft remedial action plan are necessary, they will be made, and DTSC will approve the draft remedial action plan, and a CEQA document will be filed with the state clearinghouse. The property owner's environmental consultant will then begin preparing a remedial design implementation plan, which will describe the exact technical details of the work. This plan will need to be reviewed and approved by DTSC. Prior to the start of any remedial activities, DTSC will provide the community with a work notice informing community members of the anticipated start date, working hours and days, duration of the work, and what they can expect to see. Next slide. Slide 23. So now I'll pass it back to James to get us started with the question and answer portion of this meeting.
Thank you so very much, Dennis. And thank you for sharing that information, making it more simpler and easy to understand. We'll now begin the question and answer session of the meeting. Again, just a reminder to remain on mute until you're called upon. And if you have a question or comment, use the raised hand feature at the bottom. Simply click on the raised hand feature and we'll do our best to call upon each person in order. If you're on the telephone, press *9 and that will raise your hand. And then when prompted, press *6 to unmute. Again, we'll do our best to respond to all questions. And for any questions that we can't answer, we will answer them in the responsiveness summary document. I'm going to check our Q&A and see if we have any Q&A. If you'd like to type your question in the Q&A, I will read them out loud. If you'd like to ask your question yourself, you can press the raise hand feature. And then I'd like to check in with our interpreters to make sure that we don't have any questions that may be in Spanish language. Give them a moment to double check. It doesn't look like we have any questions or comment. Thank you so very much for verifying that. I appreciate it. Just wait one more moment to see if we have any more questions. Okay, it looks like that concludes the question and answer session. So let's move to slide 24. So for those that may need more time to formulate a comment or a question, please remember that the comment period runs until March 17th. You can mail those in via email or regular USPS mail to dennis.palacios@dtsc.ca.gov, or if you see in the chat, meeting chat, there is the address of where you can mail the question or comment. After the public comment period closes, we will consider and respond to all comments received within the public comment period, which is 30 days. At that point, DTSC will make a final remedy selection, and DTSC will issue the final decision and make the response to comments document available to those who comment on the documents or request a copy of the document. It will also be in the EnviroStore database, which we will also drop in the meeting chat in case you wish to access that later, where all documents recorded, all documents for the site are located. Excellent. I'm taking one last look to make sure we don't have any raised hands or any comments or questions in the Q&A. Okay, slide 25, please. So again, for more information, you can view the documents, a physical copy, at the City of Santa Clara Public Library, the Northside branch, and that's located at 695 Moreland Way, Santa Clara, California, 95054, or online at www.envirostore.dtsc.ca.gov. Search for Freedom Circle, or you can use the site code 43010028. You can also reach out to the project manager, Dennis Palacios, and that's dennis.palacios@dtsc.ca.gov. Contact phone number is area code 818-717-6513. That information is also in the chat. You can also reach out to myself, James Gambrell, your public participation specialist, and that's james.gambrell@dtsc.ca.gov. Area code 510-529-7199. You can take a screenshot also, or a picture of the screen if you'd like to save that for easy reference later. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us. And we appreciate you being part of the project and the public participation process, and wish you a great rest of your evening and a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you, take care, and good night.